Okay, let's get started today. I love the cat. I don't so we're going to look at an example in in Android Studio of one of the templates, the master detail template, and look at that. Turn this on. So we'll go through that, and then on Friday we'll actually manipulate that as part of the in-class activity and set it up. Let's wait for this to get started, I guess. So while I'm waiting for this to get started, I posted an announcement for the Sanzio Scholarship. Sorry, you have to be a citizen. It's not my fault. I don't set them up that way. There's just rules. Yes, I know. I agree. So Sanzio is a company in town. They're right above Pizza Luce, if you know where that is, if you've ever been there. So they're up there. They make software to handle home care, so nurses who go into homes and they have to fill out forms and then update the forms and upload them into a centralized database for all home care service. And they also, their other main product is EMT, emergency responders in large cities. After the terrorist attack of 9/11, New York City wanted to update all of their first responders' communications and that stuff, that software. And so they looked at a number of different systems and bought and are now using Sanzio's EMT system. So is Los Angeles and a number of large cities. So they have this EMT software. So if an ambulance goes out, picks someone up, the techs on the ambulance can use a cell phone to basically send the information ahead to the emergency room so that some of this patient information and stuff is already there when the patient arrives in the ambulance. Stuff like that is the software they do. We have a number of alumni working there. The president of the company, CEO, something like that. He had 3 sons that all went through our CIS program. So they have strong connections. The vice president was an HAM major here. When they first started as a company of like 5 people, 3 of the 5 were St. Scholastica alumni, I think. And now they're a large company. Probably, I would guess 70. I'm just guessing. They have a big floor and a half up there in the tech center. But they still have a lot of St. Scholastica alumni. So they offer a scholarship to St. Scholastica students in CIS. So it's a good, it's not like some national competition where you're competing against everyone else in the world. You're basically competing against the other people in this room. You have to be junior or senior CIS major. And a U.S. citizen. So the post there, so you can think about applying. That's a good scholarship. It's $800. It's not a huge scholarship, but it is $800. So, okay. So we're going to go in. If I go to Learning Modules and go to UI Design for this Module 8, there's a Android in our kind of textbook. We refer to it frequently. There's Android Studio Master Detail Flow tutorial. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So if I click on that, that goes over. We're going to kind of prep for Fridays. So Friday we'll go through this tutorial. They'll talk about this master detail version, and we'll create this today and talk about how it's structured. And on Friday then we'll go through this tutorial, which will talk about how to change the code, modify the code so that it doesn't so it displays websites. So you can have a set of websites, click on a website, and view the website in different spots. So we'll look at that on Friday. But first we're going to try to understand how this works. And how you could use this even for, like, earlier we talked about a texting solution where you text people and you have a list of people. So we'll look at that and how this is structured gets us into some interesting concepts as far as fragments and communication between fragments that we haven't covered today. So I want you to just go into Android Studio, and we're going to create a new Android Studio application. And again, we're going to use this template, this master detail sample. So I'm just going to call this master detail sample. One thing we have to watch is, and we can use this, leave this as is, whenever you're using fragments, you have to, and some of this stuff we're using in this tutorial, it's got to be at least Android 3.0 or higher when they introduce tablets and some of this technology. So this defaults to Android 4, so that's fine. Now here's where we want to make sure we select the right object. We want to go down here and select the master detail flow. So we want this, the master detail flow example. And hit next. Now, in this one there'll be item. One thing will be an item, another thing will be items. And again, the title of this will be items. So we'll see like item detail, item list. We'll see that word item. So that it's just a generic term. On Friday, we could create web pages, a web page and web pages, or something like that. Or you can do contact and contacts, something like that. But we'll just leave it as item to create the generic one. Finish. Okay, while this is starting up, I'm going to go back into this. This is our Techotopia article, and I'm just going to show you how this works. By default, we're going to end up with two fragments. One displays 3 items, item 1, item 2, item 3. And then when you click on one of these items, it'll display detailed information about that. Right now it just says item 1 or item 2 or item 3. But the idea is that you could display detailed information about any one of those items. Now, on a tablet or a bigger screen, we'll have both fragments on the screen at the same time. So here's the detailed information, and I can click, and then right on that same page will be the detailed fragment. So this is my list of items, my item list, and this is my details on that item. So this is an item detail, item list. So we'll see those terms coming up over and over again. So on a tablet they're together, or a bigger screen, but on a smaller screen there'll be 2 different screens. So here I'll have 2 different screens. This is my first screen. I'll just have the list, item list. I'll click on one of the items, and then I'll see the item detail. And there'll be a back button to get back to the item list. So this is my item detail. So this will be using fragments here and set it up so that if we can display everything in one activity, we will. We'll have one activity and we'll have 2 fragments inside that activity. Otherwise, we'll have 2 activities, 2 screens, and 2 fragments in each activity. We'll see how that works. So let's look at our code here and start analyzing our code. So we see, and let's open up all the 4 main Java files. an item detail activity, item detail fragment, item list activity, and item list fragment. So again, a detail, when we say like item detail, it'll just show details about a single item. An item list will show all the items in our list and just the names of all the items in our list. And again, we have both an activity and a fragment for both. Here. So I sometimes like to draw diagrams to help me think of this stuff visually. So here's what we call a class diagram for this. We have a item list activity, and then inside it is an item list fragment is inside that. We'll see something called an interface used to communicate between those. Have you guys talked about interfaces? I don't think we do interfaces in Java 2. That's where you require certain methods to be implemented in another method, and you use the interface term. Don't think we see that in Java 2. Data structures. So you did interfaces in data structures. So you'd have like a stack that have certain method, or something that would implement a stack or something. Or what? How did you set it up? What would be an example of interface in data structures?
It'd be like a stack, and then you have your sub with different variations, like an array stack.
Right.
Stack.
Yeah, and they would have to implement certain methods of that. Okay. So we'll see the same thing here. It is kind of a little counterintuitive. It might be in that the fragment creates the interface, and then the activity subscribes or to that interface or implements that interface, and that's how we'll send information from this fragment back to the activity. And this is how Google's Android suggests and recommends that you implement this activity to fragment communications. What they want to do is want to isolate some of the logic between activities and fragments so that we have some sort of so we can take that this fragment doesn't always have to be in this activity, that there's just a couple methods, or in this case one method that's used to communicate with this fragment, and so we can put it in any activity as long as we implement that one method. And that one method will be how this fragment sends the information back to the activity. Okay, so we've got a list. So this is our list, and then we have our detailed item detail. We have an activity and an item detail fragment. So we have a fragment to show the detailed information here. Now, what are we going? So these are our four main things. What are we actually going to display? Right. Let's see. Here we have just a string, the name, like item 1, item 2, item 3. So I have a string for the title or the name. And we might have some data, some index for that, 1, 2, 3. But other times we'll have other information, so we might have, names and dates or whole thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little data structure, a little object that'll be our detailed information. And we'll use some classes in that, like a toString class from that, to handle that. So we'll create just a little extra data class that will store information in for each detailed item. And here they call it a dummy class, because again, it's just standing in for something you could implement otherwise. So if you look inside, there's a folder called dummy, And inside that is dummy content. Why don't you open up that? I'm going to have to sync this up. Oops. Okay, so dummy content is just a little class that's an array list of items that we're going to implement. So all it is a list or an array list of items. And so what are the items? Well, there's a subclass inside this class called dummy item. And so this is what we're storing. For each item, we're storing its content, a string. They'll say item 1, item 2, something like that. And an ID, which is also a string. So we have those two variables, an ID and a content. And then we have a constructor where we can construct an item given a string, an ID, and a content. And then we'll have a toString that returns the content for that item.
I have a question.
Yep.
What does the item underscore map to?
Yeah, good question. So there's an array of all the items, an array list of them, but it's not sorted, and we might have an ID here. A map is an implementation of something called a hash map, a hash table. So that lets us find any item based on their key. So maybe it's kind of like almost like in databases where you have a foreign key into something, you can look that item up in the database using SQL to find that particular item with a foreign key. But again, the key could be anything. In here, each thing is given an ID. In our case, we're going to, I think, use 1, 2, 3. But we don't know necessarily that 1 is going to be stored in the first spot of the array. We don't make that assumption. We might, because we might store 1, 2, 3, and then we might store 0, and then 7, and then 8, and then 3, or something. So there'll be different IDs there. So a hash map just lets us grab the item quickly out of the array based on the ID. So yeah, and this is pretty common in data. If you've had data structures, I think you've seen this, where we're storing both an array and a hash map of the item, so we can have access to them in two different ways. And here's our items. Here's the IDs, and here's the items were created, and they just are created when this object is the dummy content is created right away. So let's run this and see how this works. So why don't you start up an emulator. I'll try to get my oops, I'm going to do this. So this is kind of look, well, I'm waiting for this to start up, so I'll just talk a little bit about how this is set up. So we have this item list activity, and inside this will be an item list fragment. The item list fragment will do most of the work. The item list activity will just do things like display display the fragment, basically. It handles the clicks, so when you select an item, it should generally handle that, and so we'll have to look at that. Detail again, we have that detailed activity. It shouldn't do much other than display the fragment. So we have the item detail fragment that will display. Now, one thing we'll see, like in these fragments, we're used to putting lots of code in the onCreate method. So again, when a fragment starts in onCreate, you would set up your variables that would tie into your widgets on your views and things like that. With fragments, we'll talk a little bit about more of the life cycle of one of these things. Let me go. So there's a link in our notes under the Google stuff, Google Android Developer Resources on fragments. It includes the fragment life cycle. So it's pretty common in most of these environments that when you create a fragment or a form or something else, that there's a set of, because this is event driven, so only certain of you have to, if you want to do something at certain times, there has to be an event that's run at that time. So if you want to do stuff when an activity is created and before it's displayed, that's the onCreate method. So you write an onCreate method, and then the interface, the Android program interface, will call that onCreate method in your activity for you. So you don't call it; it's positioned there and called. And we see the same thing in C# when you're creating a form. There's a group of activities for a form. So there's this life cycle of activities, of methods that are called for our fragments. So there's one called onAttach. Let's make this a little bigger so you can maybe read this. So again, this is the earliest one: onAttach, onCreate view, onActivity created, onView state restored, onStart, onResume. So those are all methods we could put in our activity for certain things. And some things will happen before others, and sometimes you just have to be careful of what you're putting in there. Like a fragment. When a fragment's created, the onCreate method is called. But at that time, the fragment is not tied to an activity. It is just created, and Android hasn't done some of the background stuff to tie the activity and the fragment stuff together. Just popped up the activity, just instantiated the activity. Then it'll do some wiring to tie the activity to the fragment in code, and then it'll call the onCreate view. So that's creates and returns the view hierarchy associated with the fragment. So that means it now should know about the resources, the widgets. It should know about the activity it's in. It should know things like that. So with fragments, we will tend to do more stuff in this onCreate view than in onCreate. As we go. There's this onStart and onResume, and there's some other ones down here. OnStop and onDestroy and onDetach, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the issues we haven't talked about, is saving states. So let's say you have a form, you've got a little form and you've entered some information, you entered your phone number and your name or something like that on your screen. And then you decide, I'm going to turn this over so I can see it better, and you rotate it. That will often launch a whole new activity sometimes, or a whole new layout, and redo the fragments. So on some poorly coded apps, if you enter some things on a form and then you rotate the screen, it will lose your state information. So we've got to watch that some of the state information is maintained when we switch fragments, or when a fragment is paused. Like if you start entering information into a fragment into your code, and then your phone rings and you start talking to someone and you have to bring up a web page to look up, or your email, look up something, and then you hang up on that person and close email, during that time your background tasks may have been pushed out of memory to make room for the other things you're doing. And so we have to worry about saving information. And so some of the stuff we'll do, some of these methods are used for that. Okay, so have you run this yet? I've been talking for a long time. You should have run this by now, right? I've run it, so I know how it looks.